Hi, everyone. Welcome to week two of Dante's Inferno. This week we are in cantos four, five, and six, and I'm going to hand it over to Elias.
Okay, hi everybody.
Oops. Sorry, Elias, I just muted you.
Okay,
There you
got it. Hi everybody. All right. Um, we are going deeper into the infernal regions. And I just thought I would comment that sometimes in your first or second reading of the poem, you might not necessarily notice this, but what we're seeing are encounters as we go deeper that are really changing the poet in subtle ways into someone who is the author of the poem. So there's a kind of a slow transformation here. Dante is not the same person as, of course, you might have expected at the end of the poem as at the beginning. This canto, number four, is kind of setting up one of those big encounters about an aspect of Dante's public life, which is his earlier poetry and the culture around that poetry. So there's, as I say, there's kind of a tension here that's going to be set up. I want to mention one other thing because since we have a focus on the poetry as well as the politics, I want to jump back briefly to a moment in Canto 3 around lines 22 or so. And from the Pinsky, he says, the sighs, groans, and laments at first were so loud, resounding through starless air, I began to weep. Strange languages, horrible screams, words imbued with rage or despair, cries as of troubled sleep or of a tortured shrillness. They rose in a coil of tumult, along with noises like the slap of beating hands. What I want to point to is the acoustic landscape. Dante's, visual impact is very great, and everybody notices the power of these images. But there's also, it's mostly in the Italian, but not entirely. The passage I just read, for example, uh, a bit of it goes like this: Quivi sospiri, pianti e altri guai risonavan per l'ere senza stelle, perché il cominciare del lacrimai. Diverse lingue, orribile favelle, parole di dolore, accente dire. So the language is just kind of spitting out these horrible things that he is being forced to listen to. Um, so that's both kind of in the landscape, you might say, but even literally in his Italian. So Canto 4, one thing I want to notice about this, and then I want to quickly hand off to Samantha on because we're coming up on the big one, the big aria, maybe the most famous canto in the entire poem, that of Paolo and Francesco. But to set that up, he is going to be going into a strange landscape, which is mostly of his own invention, which is slightly crazy. And in describing this landscape, notice if you look over at the Italian briefly, the word onore, honor, seven times he uses this word or variations on it in about 30 lines. But to get there, let's see kind of how he proceeds. He awakens on the very edge of an abyss. And so Virgil is going to lead him down into this darkness, into this pit. He he believes that Virgil must be terrified to even go there. And Virgil, as he frequently does in the poem, patiently explains to Dante, no, I'm not afraid, I am anguished at the suffering of the people that we're about to see. So they're in a limbo of virtuous pagans who had merit, but merit is not sufficient. And that's the kind of theological, background of all this. So here's how things began. Or let me go down to Yeah, here we pick up the theme again of this acoustic landscape. And we're looking at lines starting at 19. Here we encountered no laments that we could hear except for sighs that trembled the timeless air. They emanated from the shadowy sadnesses, not agonies, of multitudes of children and women and men. And then Virgil explains more about limbo and all of that. Um, so I noticed just a little touch that is just so typically Dante, the sighs that trembled the timeless air. What a strange kind of poetic effect to say that it's these groans and sighing actually agitate, the very air that he breathes and so on. These are shades that look neither dead souls that look neither sad nor joyful. So they're in what we would say is a cliche in a kind of a limbo. They have no hope. They live in longing. So a strange kind of condition that they're in. As they proceed, they come across a landscape, a noble castle, as they make their way through a kind of wood of spirits, as Dante puts it. And this noble castle seems to have something to do with poetic greatness. And Dante, who is immensely ambitious, is here kind of venerating poetry as a kind of wisdom and a guide to life. And we understand that that's the way poetry, was understood in this culture. It was not really entertainment. It was something very much bigger. So he invents this noble castle with its seven gateways, or maybe they're walls. We're not quite sure. Are they about this? Is that symbolism for the seven liberal arts? We don't quite know. There's a meadow, and there seems to be a kind of a guild or a spiritual brotherhood among these poets. And Dante, as you recall here, essentially anoints himself the sixth. This is a very kind of audacious move, and it's not in Latin, it's in Italian that he makes this move. Sixth among so much wisdom. Now, we might wonder, he's descending in order to learn humility. So, what is he doing here? Is this a temptation? Is it a form of hubris? But nonetheless, just the mere sight of these great spirits, Horace and Ovid and Lucan and so on, kind of lift him up. And this atmosphere is very weird. If you happen to read the essay by Jorge Luis Borges on this canto, it's really quite wonderful. And he picks up on kind of the strangeness of this canto where he's got ancient poets in some kind of medieval castle, which might remind you of the paintings of this time, which were very anachronistic. You would see Jesus and the apostles standing in front of some kind of medieval looking building, that's sort of ahistorical stuff. So anyway, it's a slightly awkward way to accommodate these beloved classical figures. Um, it is also something about Virgil and his well-known position as a prophet of Christianity. I think we mentioned this before briefly. In his eclogues, eclogue number 4, a pastoral poem, he was taken to be predicting the coming of Christ. Historians say what he was predicting was probably the coming of some imperial figure, maybe Augustus, or that's often the way it's taken, but not in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, in fact, he was thought of as a kind of magician, and there was a whole legend around Virgil. So that's still at work for Dante. He's a very much larger than life figure. You notice he goes into a whole catalog here of virtuous pagans. It's the first catalog in the poem. It includes, of all people, Saladin, who was a Muslim enemy of the Crusades, but recognized as a figure of great prowess, virtue in that sense. And then this group of philosophers, physicians, mathematicians, among which you also see Avicenna and Averroes, who were both Muslim commentators on Aristotle. So again, kind of giving you a signal about the ecumenical nature of the culture. It's not something about Dante being a modern and his views of Islam and all of that. And we'll be reminded of that when we finally find Muhammad himself rather grotesquely tortured at the very bottom of hell. Nonetheless, it's just striking that Dante, as a very cultured figure, would recognize Avicenna and Averroes, and certainly Aristotle, because Aristotle, as the master of those who know, is in a way one of the co-designers of hell. Dante is drawing on Aristotle and Cicero for his system of the virtues. And then beyond that, St. Thomas had written a commentary on the Nicomachean Ethics, which is a major event in Western culture at that point and thereafter. So Aristotle looms very large in multiple ways in the poem. So that's the way he sets up this kind of self-coronation in a way, this audacious thing that he's doing, as he is about to make his first encounter with not a heroic figure, not someone from antiquity, but really a kind of an ordinary woman, a woman from the minor nobility, from a family that he knew well, both families involved, he knew, and then he's about to give her something very different from the mood of this canto, which, as I say, is a little allegorical and dreamlike. He's going to give her this very realistic moment on the stage for her big opera, which resonates, for centuries thereafter. So that's my opening for you, Samantha.
Thank you. Does anyone want to jump in? Any thoughts,
Yeah.
questions, reflections?
I just wanted to quip that many of these the characters before Christ, they're NPCs in today's parlance. They're non-player characters. You know. So, anyway,
Yes, right. He doesn't give them a single line. And so now
yeah.
commentators have noticed that it's like something big happened between Canto 4 and Canto 5 because they feel very different. And good point, Court. None of these figures, other than Virgil, speak to Dante really in the poem, although they greet him. They greet Virgil as he's arriving, but there's no dialogue. So now suddenly we're going into a different mode. Okay, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
No, 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 no. It's a good transition point to Canto 4. So in Canto 4, we enter the second there, I mean, there is a transition. We enter the second ring of hell and we enter a different landscape that's
Yeah.
described differently. I pulled up the Musa translation because I want to do a bit of reading together, but I'm going to start with 5. I'm going to start with the Pinsky. So I descended from first to second circle, which girdles a smaller space and greater pain, which spurs more lamentation. Minos the dreadful snarls at the gate. He examines each one's sin, judging and disposing as he curls his tail. That is, when an ill-begotten soul comes down, it comes before him and confesses all. Minos, great connoisseur of sin, discerns for every spirit its proper place in hell. So we begin with this sense of contraction, smaller space, greater pain. He can hear the wailing of lamentation. and we see the division of the souls that arrived according to their sins. And there's a lot going on in Canto 5. I want to treat it a little bit like I would treat it if I were teaching a poetry class. So we're going to read a little bit aloud together. But this is going to start to give us a vision of the landscape, the geography, the topography of hell. And here we're going to encounter sins of lust and love and other poets. At the beginning of Elias's remarks, he was talking a little bit about the culture around poetry. And one of the core questions that Dante is putting on the table for us from the beginning in conversation with Virgil and then the encounter with subsequent poets in hell is the role of the poet themselves and what our relationship to poetry is and what the work of poetry is. So we're beginning here now in the second ring with lust, with pleasure, with love, and there's this monster right at the gate, Minos. He's the judge in Greek mythology, and he judges and sentences. I was thinking later tonight I'm teaching the trial by Kafka, and I was thinking about the two in conversation with each other, and what it means to stand before this kind of authority. When the souls encounter this, I always think of him as blue for some reason, but encounter this, maybe you know why, Elias, encounter this monster at the gates of hell, they can't help but confess their sins to him. And so there's also a question now, we're confronted with judgment and division and sorting. We're confronted with the question of sin as well. What is poetry? Who are the poets? What are the poets for? And what is sin? And what are the different types of sin? And the question of the sin always, the question of the sin raises the question of the will. And this is part of the question that's going to be put on the table when we get to Francesca later on in the fifth canto as well. And what one desires, what one lusts after, what one's intentions are. And so we get this image in the first lines, judging and disposing as he curls his tail. That is, when an ill-begotten soul comes down, it comes before him and confesses all. And then he wraps himself in his tail with as many turns as levels down that shade will have to dwell. So however many times he whips his tail around is the sentence, is the level of hell that one is being sent down to, and a crowd is always waiting. Here each one learns his judgment and is assigned a place in hell. They tell, they hear, and down they all are cast. You who have come to sorrow's hospice, think well, said Minos, who at the sight of me had paused to interrupt his solemn task. Medivh, beware how you come in and whom you trust. Don't be deceived, because the gate is wide. And so there, a bit of you can think about who he's put his trust in, who he has decided to allow to lead him through hell. He's put his trust in the poet. And so should we put our trust in the poet? Here we have the judge telling us to be careful. And so he sees him and he stops him and he tells him that Virgil tells Meno that Dante is supposed to be able to pass, but he's human. And so his living soul is not allowed into hell. Much like, Orpheus, who descends, I always think of, tries to go and retrieve his love as well. And so we're down there. I'm gonna move ahead a little. So he's listening. I learned they suffer here who sinned in carnal things. It's about line 36. Their reason mastered by desire, suborned, as winter starlings riding on their wings, form crowded flocks, so spirits dip and veer, foundering in the wind's rough bufferings. Upward or downward, driven here and there, with never ease from pain or hope of rest, as chanting cranes will form a line in the air. So I saw souls come uttering cries, wind-tossed and lofted by the storm. And then he asks Virgil, who are these people? Who are these people? Can you tell me who these people are? And so we have the division of souls, which is also a bit of a prelude, a foreshadowing to the reading of the Phaedrus, and the kind of tripartite structure of the soul that we're also going to encounter. And we have the question of the will, we have the question of sin. And now, as Virgil begins to give Dante a tour of this ring of hell and point out who's there, Dante is going to be overcome with pity, with a kind of sadness, with a pity, with an overwhelming sense of empathy, which he is going to cause him to ask. He wants to ask Virgil if he can talk to some of the souls who are there. And he says, first among these you wish to know, he said, was Empress of many tongues. She so embraced lechery that she decreed it justified, legally to evade the scandal of her lust. She is that Semiramis of whom we read, successor in wife and meanness, she possessed the lands the Sultan rules. Next, she who died by her own hand for love and broke her vow to Sychaeus' ashes. After her comes lewd and wanton Cleopatra. See Helen, too, who caused a cycle of many evil years. It always bothers me that Helen is put there, but that's my own bias. And great Achilles, the hero whom love slew in his last battle. Paris and Tristan are here. He pointed out by name 1,000 souls whom love had parted from our life, or more. When I had heard my teacher tell the rules of knights and ladies of antiquity, pity overwhelmed me. Half lost in his coils, poet, I told him, I would willingly speak with those with those two who move along together and seem so light upon the wind. And he, when they drift closer, they entreat them hither. In the name of love that leads them, they will respond. Okay, so now we are also entering into kind of cultural, literary, poetic history as well. We're meeting all of these great lovers of history, great lovers from history. I'm going to pull up screen share for every. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions as I pull screen share?
Sam, I'll just throw in a quick thought on
Yeah,
those female figures, those queens of antiquity and other famous women. Just as a quick note, sin for Dante in this culture is, in a way, surprising to us. It's very social. It creates chaos. It always impacts a community in some way. So part of what I think he's doing there is pointing out the way in which, these great figures, heroines from antiquity, the problem was not that they had normal human emotions. The problem was, disorder. So I think that's maybe what we're going to get to with Francesca in a way as well. But it's going to be a recurring thing for a modern reader to realize he's always thinking about social sin in that larger dimension rather than our modern kind of individualistic focus.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to Elias for that comment because I think, in terms of the division of the public and private sphere and where, as certainly as contemporary readers, where we would put things into the private sphere in terms of, kind of like these acts, the peccati, the act, the sinful acts that, we're accustomed to think, well, that's like behind closed doors, that's, your business. Um, Absolutely, those drifted more than drifted into the public sphere for sure. And this was really hit home. I was with my partner. We went to there's a great like secondhand little chain called Mercatino in Rome. They exist outside of Rome too. But anyway, we get a lot of stuff there, and they have furniture and art. And we found this wonderful. At first, when I saw it, I thought it was a wanted poster from the 1800s. And then as I read it, I realized, oh, this isn't a wanted poster. It's a poster that is actually proclaiming the condemnation of two men that have already been sentenced, and it's just literally posted in public. It's like these guys were like guilty of this. They've been caught, apprehended, arrested, sentenced. This is their punishment, and that's posted in the public square. So, that sense of sin being a public enterprise, so to speak, and reflecting more on the social standard, and especially when it starts to get into, the discussion of Florence and Dante's, interest in like what's actually happening. You really see that. I mean, the character of its people reflected on the society, and then obviously how one would be so connected, not just in terms of, your personal life to the place that you are, but in your public life being just absolutely connected to, the kind of public morality. And, that's really well reflected here.
Anyone else want to jump in? Not that I'm going to ask for a volunteer to read where the text is highlighted. And we are going to just go to the end there. So Isabella, and so I like to do this in threes so that we can hear it together. And I want us to hear a bit of the text. So Isabella, you're up first, and then Jim, you want to read second, or do you want to? Okay. Isabella, all you.
Okay. Whatever pleases you to hear or speak, we will hear and we will speak about with you, as long as the wind here where we are is silent. The place where I was born lies on the shore where the river Po with its attendant streams descends to seek its final resting place. Love that kindles quick in the gentle heart, seized this one for the beauty of my body, torn from me. How it happened still offends me. Love that excuses no one loved from loving, seized me so strongly with delight in him that, as you see, he never leaves my side. Love led us straight to sudden death together. Cana awaits the one who quenched our lives. I hope I said that right. I have no idea who Cana is. Anyway, these were the words that came from them to us. When those offended souls had told their story, I bowed my head and kept it bowed until the poet said, "What are you thinking of?" When I finally spoke, I sighed. Alas, what sweet thoughts, and oh, how much desiring brought these two down into this agony. And then I turned to them and tried to speak. I said, Francesca, the torment that you suffer brings painful tears of pity to my eyes. I can't see the rest of it. There we go. But tell me, In that time of your sweet sighing, how, and by what sighs, did love allow you to recognize your dubious desires? And she to me, there is no greater pain than to remember in our present grief past happiness, as well your teacher knows. Ignore that. But if your great desire to learn the very root of such love as ours, I shall tell you but in words of flowing tears. One day we read, to pass the time away, of Lancelot, how he had fallen in love. We were alone, innocent of suspicion. Time and again our eyes were brought together by the book we read, our faces flushed and paled. To the moment of one line alone we yielded. It was when we read about those longed-for lips now being kissed by such a famous lover, that this one, who shall never leave my side, then kissed my mouth and trembled as he did. Our Galahad, I've never seen that spelled. Our Galahad was that book, and he who wrote it. That day we read no further. And all the while, the one of the two spirits spoke these words, the other wept in such a way that pity blurred my senses. I swooned as though to die, and fell to hell's floor as a body, dead, falls. Okay, that was the most scuffed reading I've ever given for this book club, but I think that kind of I want to believe that enhances it somehow.
It does. It absolutely does. I had a teacher once say to me that every place you stumble while you read aloud is a sign to stop and question what it is that you've read because you've stopped there in speech for a reason. So I like that prompt, and I think it's a good one. So
Seriously though, who is Kana?
Elias, who's Kana?
Kano's not a person. Kano's the bottom of hell.
Okay, good to know.
I'm not going to make Bob Dylan jokes about Kana. All right. All right. Jim, all you.
Hey, wait, Sam, which translation are you reading, real
This
quick?
is I pulled up the Pinsky translation isn't available online, and I pulled up the Musa translation because a
Okay,
number of people
thanks.
had looked at that one. So everyone can see it, right? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Back up we go.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask a question, but I was fighting Zoom.
Okay.
But I'll read. The question was when we were discussing sin being social, isn't private sin more of a Protestant creation, post-Reformation and all that? And we can get back to that later.
You know, we have a theologian in the group. Let's put him on the spot.
Well,
Hey,
I
Court.
think this also goes to your intervention, Elias, too,
Well,
the nature.
Court's got the credentials. Court, you want to jump in on that one? What do you think?
I will punt on that, but I think that's a wonderful insight. I think it speaks to it gets into the whole question of where you know the Reformation sees you know it brings reading in to the individual and I'm stumbling, but I think your insight is correct. I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I was just going to say that the private public sin part is so sort of seems to be playing out right now with our whole Epstein files. And I mean, because in the past, those would have been considered private sins, maybe 50 years ago, or I don't know.
Yeah.
The things that politicians or people in power did, men did, and now many of us don't want to tolerate that. And what was considered a private matter,
Yeah, good point.
abusing underage children, has become much more public, though we haven't had any resolution as a culture what it really means.
Well,
I don't know if there's any merit in what I'm saying, but I think there's something there.
Yeah.
I just want to make the observation that the use of children is a metaphorical red cape to the bull of American public opinion. I mean, I remember that all the way back to when the FBI went into Waco, it was to save the children. Now, granted, they killed most of the kids, but it didn't matter. It was to save the children. Okay, I'm going to read this, but you don't need to see me squinting. So I'm going to.
Hold on a second, because we're gonna pause because I think Isabella wants to jump in, Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll come back to you in a second.
Wait a second.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, real quick, let me just find the, okay. In that copy, the name is spelt really differently, but in my copy, it's Galeotto. Who's Galeotto? Is that even a person?
I think Galeotto is just the Italian spelling of Galahad.
I
No,
see.
it's an author
No?
who, as far as I read today, it's an
Oh,
author
okay.
who it's the source for
Hmm.
Francesca and Paolo. It's what they're reading, and
Yeah, okay. Okay.
he's known as the go-between. And
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I think it's then becomes a word that means the go-between
Hmm.
between the two players, in this case, Francesca and Paolo.
Yep.
So they were reading Lancelot together, which is apparently very dangerous. And this character
Never read Lancelot alone, slippery slope
No,
to
no.
sin.
well, it's a slippery slope to public sin, but the Lancelot and Guinevere, their
Mhm,
relationship was facilitated by this figure,
mhm.
whose name is easy to stumble over as well. And I think there is when I think about the distinction between private sin and public sin, I'll just add, I think private sin is often I think of the medieval distinction between how idleness is considered sinful because when you're alone by yourself, you can get up to all sorts of bad and wanton ways. But when you're with others, there's the possibility that you will be better behaved, basically, that you'll be less sinful. And so it was considered suspect to be alone because you were more inclined to sin. But I think also in this context, it's easy to think about private sin as those inner lustful thoughts or desires that one can have that are within oneself that are not necessarily confessed until they're made public in some way. But I also think about Augustine and the idea that the company we keep affects whether or not we become more or less sinful. So we have free will, the ability to decide how to act. But if we spend time with people who are engaging in sorts of sin, we're more likely to be then engaging in those forms of sin as well. Yeah, Isabel, is that a new hand? And Andrew, I saw
Yes,
you.
it's a new hand.
Okay.
I had sort of two quips almost to make. The first was that a joke. I've literally just made this connection semi-comedically because it's a book that my friend is going to start reading soon. But you know where else it's considered suspect to be alone by yourself? In the dystopian society of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I
Yeah.
don't even know what the point of that connection is. I literally just remembered it and thought it was funny to say out loud.
Well, because the loner is somebody who situates themselves
Yeah.
outside of
Yeah.
society and they become
Mhm.
a threat. Yeah. Mary?
You use the word confess in connection with the public sin.
Yeah.
Is this sort of the idea of confession as a requirement, at least in Catholicism, that you would have to go and confess your sins, that would make you less likely, or am I just off the track here?
Does somebody else want to answer that question? I think it speaks to the question of the Reformation and the privatization
There,
of sin, where instead of having to go through a formal institution, man alone can speak to God. So you
Mm-hmm.
have a kind of de-institutionalization of church authority. Andrew?
well, there was a commentary that I saw in the back of one of these books, where Dante's questions apparently mimic the questions that would be asked by a confessor.
Hmm.
Ah,
So that's an interesting little connection. So that somehow is not the confessor, the priest, who's taking the confession, right? That's not the confessor, is it?
Yeah, I mean, the way this canto starts is Mino, who one cannot but help confess before.
Yes, there you go. So it's right there. I'd also just would say one thing that the concept of reading is kind of important also, that
Yes.
Francesca and Paolo are reading together, and that they are the danger of that, the danger of the text, I guess, could be implied there. So
Yeah. Jim?
An observation, actually two observations. One, when Dante interacts with these, it's like he's most sympathetic. Is like he almost has, oh my God, there, but for the grace of God can go I, and he's much more sympathetic towards this most human and, dare I say, natural of sins.
Yeah.
Hi, Bronte. And the other thing, and I apologize, but the double entendre of Lancelot just stabbed my brain. I apologize.
I don't get it. It's
I'm not going there.
Never read about Lancelot, never listen to rock music, never play violent video games. These are the roads to sin. I'm just playing. I do think it's kind of interesting to sort of wonder whether the book is just being used as an excuse and really it is the fault of the readers for succumbing to sin, or whether this is genuinely the case of books are genuinely dangerous objects that inspire sin. Like which has the more blame here is sort of an
Yeah.
interesting question to me.
Yes. And Elias, do you want to respond to that? The first thing that it makes me think of is a line from Hamlet when Ophelia is told to read on of a Bible so that she might not be suspected of being alone. There's certain books that are acceptable, but I think there is a larger question about the role of literature. Sorry, Elias.
Yeah, definitely. She begins by blaming the book, and then she slips into more or less quoting Dante's own poetry back to him. And this is what really shakes him, because in his earlier life, he was part of this poetic culture. Love is this great power. Arendt just put a note in here about line 103. Love, the power that the lover can't resist.
Yeah.
So she's saying, see, it's not really my fault. And she's also, I guess, sort of saying, I'm in the company of these other great women in some way. Um, I came under the power of love, and so I'm telling you this story so you understand our great catastrophe. So she is seducing us.
Yeah. She's telling us a story.
Yeah,
She's not confessing. She's
right.
she's she's beguiling us with her
Yeah.
love affair. And I think we get the sense of desire from that. She's in a way making the sin um, sound tempting. Who doesn't want to go read Lancelot now? But
Yeah.
yeah. Do we want to hear it again? Do we want to hear? Let's hear it. Jim, why don't you read it through for us?
Okay, just you don't need to see me squinting, so I'm shutting video off.
Okay.
Hold on. Whatever pleases you to hear or speak, we will hear and we will speak about with you. As long as the wind here where we are is silent. The place where I was born lies on the shores where the river Po, with its attendant streams, descends to seek its final resting place. Love that kindles quick in the gentle heart sees this one for the beauty of my body, torn from me. How it happens still offends me. Love that excuses no one's love from loving sees me so strongly with delight in him that, as you see, he never leaves my side. Love led us straight up sudden death together. Cana awaits the one who quenched our lives. These were the words that came from them to us. When those offended souls had told their story, I bowed my head and kept it bowed until the poet said, "What are you thinking of?" When finally I spoke, I sighed. Alas, what sweet thoughts, and oh, how much desiring brought these two down into this agony. And then I turned to them and I tried to speak. I said, "Francesca, the torment that you suffer brings painful tears of pity to my eyes. But tell me, in that time of your sweet sighing, how, and by what signs, did love allow you to recognize your dubious desires?" And she to me, "There is no greater pain than to remember, in our present grief, past happiness, as well your teacher knows. But if your great desire is to learn the very root of such a love as ours, I shall tell you, but in words of flowing tears. One day we read, to pass the time away, of Lancelot, how he had fallen in love. We were alone, innocent of suspicion. Time and again our eyes were brought together by the book we read. Our faces flushed and paled. To the moment of one line alone we yielded. It was when we read about those longed-for lips now being kissed by such a famous lover that this one, who shall never leave my side, then kissed my mouth and trembled as he did. Our Galliot was that book, and he who wrote it. That day we read no further, and all the while the one of the two spirits woke these words. The other wept in such a way that pity blurred my senses. I swooned as though to die, and fell to hell's floor as a body dead falls.
Thank you. Any thoughts? Anything stand out this time through?
I had a.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I had a lot of trouble with this section. The first Amor. Where are we? I may be in the wrong place suddenly.
Like line 100-ish, if that were.
So for such. Here, where the Po finds peace with all its followers, love, which in gentle hearts is quickly born, seized him for my fair body. I for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what that meant for the longest time. Seized him. I guess that's in the end. I think that seized him is Paolo, but for my fair body, I couldn't understand.
What line are you on?
That's
I'm You're reading from the Pinsky, right?
Yeah, I'm reading from the Pinsky because I don't have the other.
Yeah.
It's lines 88
87.
80.
Yeah, 87 through 90.
Okay.
87. I don't know if anyone else had trouble with that. I looked at all the two other translations I have, and they were also. I just found it confusing. But
it sounds a little funny, doesn't it? It's love that has seized him for her body.
Yes, which is interesting because it's so carnal in that way. So go straight ahead, lustful, which isn't necessarily the rest of the vibe.
Yeah, true.
I guess. And I imagine that with all the translations being sort of difficult, that the Italian must be tricky. That's the other part. I don't know if anybody can speak to that. But.
A little bit, it's clear enough that what the subject and the verb are there, that it's love that's seizing him, seizing Paolo for her body. It's also in that line about, let's see if I can find it here. Love which in gentle hearts is quickly born. This is this echo of Dante. So she's again kind of looking at him like, you know, my reading experience has been formed by your history, your work. You're part of this school of poets. You guys go on and on about the power of love and so on. So he's a little stunned as he's thinking about um, his earlier life, really. And what was that about? What was it for? You know, it's just now been overwhelmed by political violence in his exile, and there's nothing more powerful in his mind right now. But as he's reviewing all these other lives that he's lived, this is the first one that he has kind of a collision with. And it seems like, this is just kind of my interpretation, it's so stunning to him, he faints. I don't know quite what to make of a man fainting, but that's what he does. He does that more than once in the poem.
Hmm.
He faints
I
constantly
just,
throughout the poem, actually. It's quite
Yeah,
extraordinary.
he's very frail or something. Yeah.
Always
I can
fainting.
only imagine the workout that Virgil got, like just dragging him around hell to get him
Yeah,
to
that's it.
die.
Right, there's some comedy. There's a little bit of comedy there. Yeah,
Divine
Dante's just
comedy, one might even say.
he's the total greenhorn. Cannot figure out where he is. Doesn't know what questions to ask. What is he looking at?
Constantly just crying his
Yeah,
eyes out.
yeah.
can, can I
He's
just
quite
add that in
pathetic,
that?
actually.
Can I just add in that section also? Now this makes more sense. It's just love, which in gentle hearts is quickly born, seized him from my fair body, and then which in a fierce manner that still torments my soul, which is so there's almost a sense of violence against her
Yeah,
at this point, as if she's not
yeah.
that's where, I read in these commentaries that she
Good
feels she's
point.
not to
Good point.
blame. And this is
Hmm.
sort of another sign of that
Hmm.
she's been, taken by him in a certain way. I didn't understand the fierceness until now, what that really meant.
And she's a murder victim, and she is one of three women in the poem that have violent marriages or marital situations. Pia in Purgatory 3 is a similar woman, and Picarda in Paradiso 3 is also. So what does that mean? I don't know, but Dante just seems to have a certain kind of insight into that kind of situation, and she's the first woman who died in this violent way, and was not. I mean, the crime was famous in Florence. He, as I say, he knew both families, but he gave her immortality in a way by writing her up in this poem. She was no one in particular, really minor nobility, but Dante, for his own reasons, kind of elevates her in this remarkable way and made her, yeah, as I say, famous for centuries thereafter. You know, she's the prototype of Madame Bovary, Anna Karenina. There's an opera about Francesca da Rimini and so on. So she goes into the big time.
Um, I want to, and I mean, he's also using it to critique Italy as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's bringing out another term we can use, which is reason, or the absence of reason. And thinking about Dante fainting, the question of which sinners is he going to pity and which sinners is he going to be less pitiful of? Can you say that, pitiful of? Now we will speak and hear as you may please. So, Francesca is a gifted speaker. She's artful with language. And so you have logos, you have reason, you have speech in a hearing, listening, to speak and hear, while the wind for our discourse is still. So we have the scene of the swarming the swarming of the birds. My birthplace is a city that lies where the Poe finds peace with all its followers. Love, let me let Yvonne in. Love, which in gentle hearts is quickly born, seized him for my fair body. So it acts upon him. He doesn't have control
Right.
or agency. He doesn't have the ability to exercise reason or to make a judgment. It's quickly born. It's explosive. It's like a volcano. And it's seized. It seized him. The sight of her fair body seized him, which in a fierce manner that still torments my soul, was torn untimely away from me. Love, which absolves none who are loved from loving. Love absolves none who are loved from loving. There we have reason. She's speaking in logic, right? Love doesn't absolve the lovers from their loving. Made my heart burn with joy so strong that as you see it cleaves still to him. Here, even here in hell, you can still see it. Love gave us both one death. Cana awaits the one who took our lives. Love took their lives. Love.
Cana, by the way, is another level of hell.
It's the second ring of the lowest of the innermost circle of hell.
Yeah, and
ring of hell.
And Francesca's true husband is due to go there. That's what that means, right? Okay. Yeah. He apparently was not an attractive man, and Paolo was somewhat tricked into marrying her. So what are you going to do?
Well, she has an affair with her husband's brother, Paolo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just to be clear. Isabella? And then Daphne?
All right. Well, I was just gonna say with I don't know why it's so bad today.
Why what's so bad today?
Oh, the power keeps going on and off. That's why the lights keep flickering on and off. Perks of island living. Anyway, I was gonna say that all this talk about, by Dante just choosing to write about, like, these random people. They're not random, they're very intentionally chosen. But just these people who really wouldn't have been known for very long if they weren't in what would eventually become the Divine Comedy kind of reminds me of this sort of broader recurring idea that sort of shows up for the Inferno and presumably in the other parts, but I never got past the Inferno. This idea of like memory. Like if in the earlier circles, like the sinners are all like, dude, tell Italy how I'm doing, bring news up. But in the later circles, people are like, I'm not telling you this. I don't want people to know I'm here. I don't want people to know about me. I'm only telling you this because I think you're a dead spirit and you're never getting out of hell. So you get these sort of interesting ideas of like throughout this poem developing this idea of like memory and retelling and bearing witness and sharing the story of what happened that I think is kind of interesting. And that sort of on a meta level is kind of brought into play here with the idea of like we only remember Francesca and Paolo because they're part of this story.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah, Daphne?
Just that in the notes to one of my translations, because I still don't have the Pinsky, it says that Francesca was forced into a political marriage. It was always a loveless marriage with a very deformed husband. And maybe that is, and that they were friends of Dante's in his real life. And that maybe there is a justification to her adultery, shall we say, since she was not, she didn't choose this marriage and she was committed to it by external social forces.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. um, Giovanni the Lame, I think,
Hmm.
her
Hmm.
husband's name, and I don't remember if he was de deformed because of battle or but he was a warrior, but had a reputation. Um, yeah, but I think there's question of sympathy here or pity. Um, why does Dante faint?
Yeah.
Here we have Francesca, regaling us with this love story, and and it's rather romantic, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, Elias, do you want to say something?
Wouldn't some people say, didn't this couple get exactly what they wanted?
To spend eternity together.
Yeah, hugging, like forever hugging.
Yeah, it makes me think of what's the painting of the lovers ascending
Yeah.
the Chagall, the
Hmm.
Chagall
Hmm.
lovers. Jim?
Yeah, hold on for a second. The just going back to, as I said, I think Dante's looking at them, as I said, there but for the grace of God go I. And then has his own poetry recited back to him as one of the causes for their being in hell.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to use an old Southernism, I think he was having a come to Jesus moment for a bit.
Yeah. This is part
And
of his development. Yeah.
although the getting what they want with the spending eternity together kind of reminds me of the Meatloaf song "Paradise by the Dashboard Light." It's the
Got me there.
final, yeah, the back and the back and forth at the end of the song is telling and can be viewed as a warning.
Mm.
Um, I'm just looking at the note in our Pinsky tradition, and it emphasizes the fact that these are literary lovers, that these
Yeah.
are the great lovers from literature, um, from the ancient epics and medieval romances, the knights and ladies of antiquity who died for love in the name of love. And I think that also I don't want to lose the question of books and poets in relationship to, having Dante read back to himself as well in the scene and what that might imply. All right, Court?
Yeah.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
go
Art.
ahead, Court.
Oh,
No, go ahead.
Arendt and then Court.
Oh, grazie. Yeah, I was just been kind of going back and forth in the commentary that I have on the side, and obviously, we've been talking about the kind of reference back to Dante's own poetry, which, of course, makes sense why he would be, overwhelmed by this because, I mean, literally, they're repeating back, his own words, and he's realizing like I've committed also, this sin, but within this context of the literary kind of activity of love, which Samantha was just talking about. And in the commentary, it also makes a point of because the line from the Vita Nuova is well in Italian it's amore e il cor gentil sono una cosa, like love and the gentle heart, but gentle in the sense of like genteel also, like the
Yeah.
noble heart are one thing. And it does bring up this question of the division of the soul, like what overcomes what? Does reason overcome love, or does love overcome reason? Because the use of the word ratto is also the same word for rape. And so this idea in the commentary, it says, love without time to defend itself, right? Without the time for like the soul to defend itself. So love just like completely overwhelms like a fire. It uses also the image there, and obviously, fire and love connected. So this sense that he's witnessing, he's standing there and bearing witness to that which he has also given language to in his own works is clearly an overwhelming moment.
Yeah.
There's the question of, the way that you put it made me think of the question, what might Dante be guilty of in others reading his work, of not knowing how one is read. What is the legacy of one's work, which is part of the framework for the death of Virgil that we read last year. Virgil, very, very, in the text, very anxious about the completion of his last work, but the whole book revolves around this larger question of the role and responsibility of the artist in society, of the writer in society, and thinking about whether or not their work will ultimately do more good or harm for the world, and the question of whether or not one should destroy their work. Here, Dante, he's imagining that confrontation. It's a bit, it seems to me. Court?
Yeah, I'm still smarting from my weak response earlier, and I think this marvelously rich conversation speaks to it. Luther made a point of writing in the vulgar tongue, as they called it, recognizing that much of what sin and the confession involved was private, but then what language was Dante writing in the 13th century, and what sins was Augustine worrying about way back in the day? He was not worrying about things he was doing in the public sphere. He was worrying about what Freud would call thinking bad thoughts. These things just run throughout the tradition, and Dante does a wonderful part, starting out right away by identifying Minos as a connoisseur of sins. He knows more about sin than any of you do, and so he knows right where to put you. And then just the wonderful poetry. I keep thinking of the image of the murmuration and of starlings and how they're floating about in that way. It's just you're reminded frequently, just again, of you're reading poetry, and it's and the strength of poetry in that context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's yes, the strength of poetry. He and looking at the last four stanzas, five stanzas. I mean, Dante is also giving it back to us, right? That these lines can be read as seduction as well, and they're so incredibly beautiful that we read of Lancelot by love constrained, alone, suspecting nothing, at our leisure. So there we have that aloneness and leisure, danger for sin, possibility, creating the container for sin. Sometimes at what we read, our glances joined, looking from the book, each to the other's eyes, and then the color in our faces drained. But one particular moment alone, it was defeated us. The longed for smile, it said, was kissed by that most noble lover. And so there again, the loss of reason to passion. And can you imagine the lovers? I mean, that's what Bob Dylan does, right? In those lyrics I cited last week, he imagines the lovers reading Dante. Dante imagines the lovers reading Lancelot. At this one who now will never leave my side. at this one who now will never leave my side. I mean, isn't that what everyone, says they want from love? Somebody who won't leave. Kissed my mouth, trembling. I Galeato, that book, and so was he who wrote it.
Mm.
And then the brutality. That day we read no further. And it's that volta in that final movement there. We get what's the word? There's a word that I want. It starts with a P. It's the rhetorical term that Dante's to name what he's doing there poetically. It's in my notes somewhere.
Pericope.
No, but that's the definition
Wow.
of the other term that I just used. He's describing what happens. She's describing what happens, and it's paraphrasis instead of naming it. And it's that moment there, and where we read no further. You pause, so it's a stop, and then it's a stop, and then you have to think about what it's naming. And you realize, all the while the one shade spoke, the other at her side was weeping. My pity overwhelmed me, and I felt myself go slack. Swooning as in death, right? So swooning as in death. I cadi, come corpo morto cadi. I don't know how to read Italian. I try. I felt,
that
what?
That point about reading no further.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the commentators that says, well, if they had, they would have read about the destruction of the court of Arthur.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they missed the point, right? They they didn't read to the end of the story, and that was a mistake, you could say.
Yeah.
Also, don't get too kind of historical. I'm sorry, go ahead. Who was that?
Weren't they murdered at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's a little bit not so much that they didn't get the point of the story, is that
That's true too.
They couldn't get the point. They weren't permitted.
Well, I mean, that's the point Dante's making here.
Yes.
They read no further. They were murdered. That's what he's saying. But yeah. I mean, if you say it like that, it takes away the internal twisting that happens when you read those lines. Jim?
Just a quick question. Any chance we get a link or a site for the version of Lancelot to read, so for those of us who are not that familiar with it may have a greater understanding?
Well, it's the Arthurian tales.
I
believe. Does somebody want to correct me? I think the story of Lancelot is in the Arthurian tales.
Yeah.
Aren't there also like a great many collection of the Arthurian tales, though?
Many. I started reading through some of them a couple of years ago, and there are many different renditions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So going to Mort.org would be okay?
I will send some recommendations. I'll put them in the group.
Yeah, I mean, I read the Arthurian stuff or tried to read it when I was like 10.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a few years.
So he was the notes is that that Dante was reading the French version. So we can find the version that he had. I don't have it to hand right now. Andrew?
I mean,
I just wanted to. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say for French, that's fine. I mean, I could read that.
You could read what?
No, if it's a French language, I can work with that because I can read French.
Okay, well, medieval French? No, I'm just,
Yeah.
well, I'll find it. I shall find it and send it to you.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
I,
I mean,
yeah.
I was just
I was going to say I was bumbling through Pascal in the summer, so how much worse could it be?
Um, okay, so I'll send along the Lancelot Grail, some versions of the Lancelot Grail cycles. Andrew?
I was just going to say after the last time we had met, I was thinking about how many copies of Dante's comedy there might have been, and I did a little research, and I guess there were thought to have been sort of 400 to 800 handwritten
Yeah.
copies before the advent of printing. And of
Yep.
course, Dante didn't know anything about printing. And so what he's describing also is an interesting kind of textural thing, which is what they are reading is a book, I guess, bound, but it's been hand written by someone, and there wouldn't have been very many copies of whatever it was. And Lancelot, I guess, was a almost mass market story in that era, right? I guess there would have been more of that than other things because there was a limit to how many things could be written out in a way that would make them legible and readable and transferable. Anyway, I just was thinking about that. That's the history of printing and how fragile these texts really were. Even the
Yeah.
ones that Dante is reading that are informing his story are all very fragile and very limited in their access, or people were limited in their access to them.
Mhm.
Anyway, that was that. Sorry.
Interesting though, popular stories that could were widely understood. That the story of Lancelot was a touchstone that the Dante could be confident that the public generally knew is interesting in that context. I was thinking of, you know, how I know the story of, I used to be into knights when I was a kid, so that was part of it. But, in popular culture, it's Disney's Sword in the Stone, or can't remember who wrote the musical now with, Richard Harris and Robert Goulet.
Camelot.
Yeah, Camelot. That's now our popular conception of who Lancelot was, and
Don't forget Monty Python.
Monty
Yeah.
Python, right? That so we bring all of that, reading it now, we bring all of that baggage to understanding these stories, and it's very interesting to think about how it would have been understood with a handwritten text that was, would have been seen as a treasure to be carried
Yeah.
around,
Yeah.
and how these similar sorts of allusions played in that time and in that culture is very interesting.
Daphne?
According to the Dorothy Sayers footnote, the book that Dante was actually reading was called Lancelot de Lac.
Right.
So Galeote, Lancelot de Lac. So I suppose we could find that book. You get the answer.
Very good. Lancelot of the Lake. Yes? I'm trying to learn French.
Right. Well, I was kind of just thinking too about with all this talk about like pop culture of the day. A sort of interesting, not quite tension, but almost tension I find in the way Dante is discussed is that like a lot of classic literature, the number one praise you give to a classic book or a classic poem or a classic movie or a classic anything is, oh, it is timeless. Oh, it is universal. And maybe there are some universal ideas in Dante, but I feel like one should also acknowledge that it is niche specific and temporally bound, as, dare I say, hell. Like there's all these pop culture references. You can kind of call them pop culture references, even if there wasn't really pop at the time. Like it's general culture. You're expected to know about all these 14th century Italian politics, 13th century Italian politics that make no sense to somebody without classical training in them. You're expected to know who all these Greek and Roman people are because that's not going to be explained in the text. They just get their names listed off and we expect that you know them. Smart, educated, 14th century Italian reader you are. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to me and funny and almost ironic. Like, yes, the most universal and timeless piece of literature. Dante walks around hell and talks about 14th century Italian politics, appealing to all of humanity there. Like, obviously, I do see the universal ideas, but like, I can't help but make the joke. It's very funny to me.
Well, I think it does emphasize different forms of text and the ways in which you can speak across both audiences and generations. You don't have to know the internal politics of Italy to appreciate Inferno, but
Yeah.
I think one of the beauties of this text is that, it really avails itself to an annotated reading. We can breaking down each of the references, the names, the stories behind them, and then the way that those get braided together in the story
Yeah.
that Dante is telling. So I read it, it's almost can become a syllabus or an invitation, I think, for contemporary readers as well. I mean, as tonight's meeting has proved, a number of you want to go read Lancelot now. Clearly not turned off by the prospect of eternal damnation, or the sin it may invite into your lives. But I'm not here to make judgment. So maybe we can read it as
On,
I'm
on
done,
that
I'm
on
done
that
with my
point,
comedy for tonight. But
on, on that very point, Sam, let
yes.
me ask just it's kind of a big question that is a famous one. Um, Dante's got a system he's working with, and is Francesca maybe the first of these figures that is actually going to break the system? Does she seem to be, because of the way she's sympathetic to a modern reader, is she taking us kind of outside the system, partly because of her realism, but also because, we empathize with her from various angles and various ways. This is the famous thing that Eric Auerbach says that Dante did that makes him so unmedieval and so secular, not theological. Anybody might have any thoughts on that? Does he break the system?
Well, what do you mean by break the system?
Well,
So,
this is supposed to be a just scene that she's being punished, and this punishment, is supposed to be like on the gates of hell, it says, justice right there is supposed to be the underpinnings of it. And yet we don't react that way. We empathize with her. When Dante seems to, once he's created this situation, he himself is very moved by it. So what is he saying something with that? I mean, he's both the architect of the scenes we're witnessing, and yet he's also in front of us responding in a way that you kind of wonder, what was he saying here with the way he set her up and then is so moved by what he did.
I'm just gonna pause for a second and ask a question I often ask before I call on Jim and Isabella. Is there anybody who hasn't jumped in who wants to jump in tonight? Um, the yeah, Isabella?
Well, I was gonna say in sort of answering the question, well, I don't really know if I'm the right person to answer that question because I'm kind of against the idea of hell just like as a concept. So I'm not really sure I should be the one to decide like whether somebody is deserving of hell or not and whether that breaks the system. I don't know. But I think it is kind of an interesting question where you kind of get like the two sides of Dante, the two aspects of Dante. Like both the one who's like the actual writer who's like
Mhm.
constructing all these terrible torments for these like real people in many cases.
Mhm.
And then you also have like fictional character Dante, who, as we have previously established, is crying and weeping and fainting and just and not
Yeah.
having a good time of it, being generally pitiful, pitying all the sinners.
Yeah.
I guess that you can kind of. I think it's mentioned, and I've only heard of this secondhand, so it's not entirely true, but I think it's mentioned that those in hell are like physically incapable of pitying the damned in hell. Like it's just like as they have become like they go up there and they're like, yes, I have become in tune with heavenly justice, which means
Mm.
that I totally see the justice in hell. So maybe it's kind of like that, where like, yeah, you have to go through hell and you start out pitying these people, but as you go through and become more in tune with this sort of heavenly justice, this godly justice, you move past that. So maybe it's I this is obviously I haven't read the full Divine Comedy, so this is just kind of spitballing essentially. But maybe it's sort of an idea like that of like you growing past like to see the justice beyond just the immediate reaction to the horror of hell.
I don't read it as a question of justice personally, but I mean, judgment is different than justice.
Hmm.
And the looking if we look at the Italian on 40 and the English on 41, one of the things that's lost in the translation is the anaphora, which keeps the terza rima, but it introduces a different style of line, which literally breaks the form. So it's a way
Oh.
for
Hmm.
Dante to signal to us that what she's saying is set apart. So amor,
Mm.
and then in English we get where, man, or with. So it breaks it. We don't get the same kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
intensity of the rhetorical repetition. Amor cal cor che
Mhm.
in pio racto s'apprende prese consui della bella persona. I don't speak Italian. Che mi fu tolta il moda ancora mi offenda. Amor, amor. So it's really actually, I read that it's giving her, I can understand it a bit, but it's giving her a sense of agency. There's this kind of emphatic willfulness in the repetition.
Mhm. Mhm.
Aren't
Um,
those considered the rules of love in courtly love? This
Repetition.
well, the things that he says, love which in gentle hearts is quickly born, love which absolves none who are loving, or who are
Mhm.
loved from loving, and love
Mhm.
gave us both one death.
Yeah,
Those are sort of the underpinnings of courtly love. I think
right.
Mhm.
that's,
Mhm.
and which is why Dante does present it as a rhetorical device, amor, amor, amor. And you do lose it in this particular translation, but it doesn't, it's still there.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know what the MF stands for still, Sherman. I don't know you put your hand up. Do you want to jump in? When I sent you the book, I searched high and low through all your registrations for your first name to address it to you, by the way, and it was lost to me, so I apologize.
No, I'll fix it for the next time. I think to get back to the question that Elias was asking, and maybe some of the other comments, I think that there's a reason that he faints, and I think that the question is less one of judgment and justice and one of degree and what we're willing to accept. And isn't Dante
Mhm.
also going to lead us to ideas about personal sin, so to speak, and societal sin? So he wants that Dante the Pilgrim is almost representing our
Yeah,
response,
definitely.
but Dante the
Yeah.
poet is trying to show us a larger scale that that
Mhm.
these will accrete. That if we allow will or our the way we feel to subvert our minds, that these will accrete and it'll become a bigger picture. I also don't think
Mhm.
that am I mistaken, but I almost feel as if despite such a religious or theological construct. This is almost more of a philosophical treatise. It's almost as if it uses the trappings of theology to put forth a philosophical treatise. Am I making?
Yeah.
I think that's a good comment.
Yeah, I think
Dante
we'll
is
put
kind of, people maybe
I-
expect he's going to be the mouthpiece of St. Thomas Aquinas or something. Dante is his own person. I've never seen anybody who could convince me he's just being a conventional Catholic. He's doing something else. And it's got to do with the church. It's got to do with empire and Florentine politics. But toward the end of his life, he describes himself as a party of one.
All right, everyone, I want to mark the time. I know that we've gone a little over, unless I'm reading the clock wrong. Am I reading the clock wrong? Thank you so much for a really engaging conversation.
Thanks, folks.
I hope it was a nice reprieve, breath of fresh air, and an invitation to not look at the news for 90 minutes. So, please,
Sam,
anyone want the last word tonight?
Sam, can I make a suggestion for the upcoming classes?
Sure.
As we leave a particular level of hell, can we think of someone contemporary who belongs in it?
Oh, I have to send you the joke.
Yeah.
Oh, do you guys want to watch the joke? We can watch the joke together. If anyone has to leave, they can leave and it can be on the recording. Do you want to watch the joke?
Sure.
It's not very long. Let me grab it. It's really, I feel like we could all use a joke for some reason, or maybe that's just me. I could use a joke. I like jokes.
It's always good to laugh.
It is good to laugh.
I'll make a joke. Isabella's comment about not believing in the concept of hell, then taking a class on the Inferno. It's kind of like a vegetarian booking a meal at House of Prime Rib to understand the nature of their decision.
I mean, when I say I don't believe in hell, like I just feel like what I was trying to say, well, okay, I am an atheist, but also I feel like hell inevitably runs into some inherently unjust territories, like the idea of punishing finite life with eternal punishment. I can't quite get behind that as being like a just thing to do.
Well, you've got a few weeks now to cogitate on that, to think on it, you know?
Yeah.
All right. It's 3 minutes.
Hello. It's nice to see you all here. Now, as the more perceptive of you probably realized by now, this is hell. And I am the devil. Good evening. But you can call me Toby, if you like. We try to keep things informal here, as well as infernal. That's just a little joke of mine. I tell it every time. Now, you're all here for eternity. Ooh, which I hardly need tell you is a heck of a long time. So you'll all get to know each other pretty well by the end. But for now, I'm going to have to split you up into groups. Will you stop screaming? Thank you. Now, murderers, over here, please. Thank you. Looters and pillagers over here. Thieves, if you could join them. And lawyers, you're in that lot. Fornicators, if you could step forward. My God, there are a lot of you. Could I split you up into adulterers and the rest? Male adulterers, if you could just form a line in front of that small guillotine in the corner there. The French, are you here? Okay. If you'd just like to come down here with the Germans, that'd be... I'm sure you'll have plenty to talk about. Okay, atheists, over here, please. You must be feeling a right bunch of nitwits. Oh, mine. And finally, Christians. Christians. Ah, yes, I'm sorry. I'm afraid the Jews were right. If you could come down here, that'd be really kind. Thank you. Okay. Right. Well, are there any questions? Yes. No, I'm afraid we don't have any toilets. If you'd read your Bible, you might have seen that it was damnation without relief. So if you didn't go before you came, then I'm afraid you're not going to enjoy yourself very much. But then I believe that's the idea. Okay, well, it's over to you, Adolf. And I'll catch you all later at the barbecue. Bye. See, the library card system...
I'm sorry.
Was...
My son to death. Yes, yes, so it would seem. Please up.
Okay. I will send you the updated version of that joke. That's the original. The updated version includes a few more people from contemporary political life. So
please do. Please bring one every week.
Oh, okay, jokes. I shall bring jokes.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Bye.